Ladies and gentle gamers, welcome back to To Be Determined. In today's video, we're going to be going over all of the dyes that are currently in Hypixel SkyBlock and ranking them from S+ to F. So if you guys want to make your own tier list, there will be a link in the description. And if you think I got something wrong, feel free to leave me a comment. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So today we're going to be ranking these dyes based on how good they look, as well as how easy they are to acquire, and whether or not it's actually worth it to get them. And our first dye is Aquamarine dye, which at the moment is going for 1.5 billion coins. Personally, I think it looks pretty good, especially with like Warden helmet and shadow goggles, but to be honest, those kind of look good with pretty much anything. It could also look very good with the diamond heads from dungeons. Those also look very nice with it, but at the price of 1.5 billion coins per, I don't really think it's worth it. I don't think it's F tier, but it's definitely not on that high of a level for me, so we're gonna put it in B. The next dye is the Archfiend dye, which is a red dye that drops from different Archfiend dice. This one's actually kind of easy to get, honestly. It does require a bit of gambling, but there's a pretty high chance that you'll drop one. And at the moment, they're only going for 100 mil per. Now, we do run into the problem, though, of this one not really looking too good with a lot of things. I think it's pretty similar to the Reaper mask or the Reaper armor. After you use the ability on it, it turns red for a few seconds. I think it's about the same color. So it probably goes well with Reaper Mask, Warden Heart, all those other ones. And I do think it would go well with Diamond Heads as well. It is a very nice color in my opinion. And for as cheap as it is, I do think it's pretty good. So we're going to put it in S tier. This next dye is Bingo Blue, which is acquired from the Bingo event. You need a ton of points to get one of these, but they do look really nice. It's pretty similar to Lapis armor. And it's a very similar color to just the regular Aurora set. It is about 500 million coins a piece though. I do think it looks really good though, so we're gonna put it in the A category. Next up is the Bone dye, which is just a pretty much white dye. It's a little bit gray, but pretty much white. I think it goes very well with Warden armor. Of course, it's pretty much the same color as the Warden helmet, and white goes with pretty much anything, so you can kind of put it on most things and it'll look good. I don't think it would look good on like Devon's armor or Fermento, but I've seen some people run this with like a diamond head and shadow goggles, things like that. So I think it's very solid on dungeon gear. Plus, it's very similar to Archfiend dye, only 100 mil a piece. So I think it's worthy of the S tier. Next up, we have the Brick Red dye, which is kind of a darker red than Archfiend dye. It looks pretty decent, but I don't think it's as good as Archfiend, especially considering the price is 4.5 times the price of Archfiend, and I just think it looks worse. We're gonna put it in F tier. It just doesn't look as good as Archfiend, and it's more expensive. There's not really any reason to get it, in my opinion. Next up is the Byzantium dye, which personally, I really like this one. It goes super well with Final Destination. It is very pricey though, 350 mil a piece. And that's the cheap one. The expensive ones are 500 mil. I do think it looks really solid with a few sets, but again, it is kind of an odd color and it's a bit dark. So along with the price, I don't really think it's worth going for. So even though I do like it, we are going to put it in the not worth tier because I do think there are some better purple dyes in the game. Next up is the Carmine dye, which is very similar to Archfiend dye, but I think it is a little bit brighter. There's a little comparison. This one seems to be slightly darker, but I think it's a little bit more bold, so it does kind of look better in my opinion. However, it is again 4.5 times as expensive as the Archfiend dice. Now it does look better, so I'm not going to put it in F tier, but I do think it is not worth, so it's going in B. Next up is the Celadon dye, which I believe is a drop from Bacte. There was a bug with this one a while back, so a lot of these got put on armor sets. So there are a lot of armor sets out there that have Celadon dyes applied, at least compared to some of these other dyes that are super rare. But I don't think it looks that great. Again, probably looks good with Warden helmet and some of those other ones that look good with everything, but I don't think it'd look great on like a Fermento set or a Devon armor set, which not too many dyes would, to be fair, but I just don't think it's worth going for, and I think it's ugly. It is also 500 million coins a piece. So even though I love the Rift, I'm not loving this dye, and I think I'm gonna have to put it in F tier. It is what it is. Next up, we have the Celeste dye, which is a really nice looking dye. It's like a very light blue. It is, however, so rare that there are none on the auction house. All the ones dropped from Slayers are usually about 500 mil, but nobody likes to do Spin Slayers, so it's a bit more expensive. I do think it looks really good, but again, it's so rare and so expensive. It's super hard to get a full 3 for an armor set. So just for that, I'm gonna have to put it in very good instead of S. Next up, we have chocolate dye. Moving on, copper dye looks better than chocolate dye, only 30 times more expensive. But again, it's kind of like an orangey brownish. I don't think it'd look too good with most armor sets. Could put it on your Devon armor to make it look like kind of worn down, but I don't think anybody wants to look worn down. So I'm gonna put it in B tier. It's super cheap, but kind of ugly. Next up is the cyclamen dye, which is another dye that looks really good with Final Destination. It's kind of a pinkish purple color, and it currently goes for less than 100 mil a piece. I think this would go pretty well with a lot of armor sets, honestly. You could even put it with a Fermento set if you have the skin that works with it, but even without a skin, honestly, it probably looks pretty solid. So this one I'm gonna put in S tier. Pretty cheap, and also pretty. Next up is the dark purple dye. Now this is the dye that comes from the auction house or the dark auction. Currently there's none of them on the auction house, but I have seen these go for like billions of coins before, or at least close to it. It does look pretty solid, but again, not too many sets that it would really go with, and it's super expensive, so we're gonna put it in not worth. Next up is the dung armor dye. Yes, it's a real thing, goes for about 80 million coins right now, but it doesn't really look that good. It's like a brownish purple color. I guess you could say burgundy, but honestly, in my opinion, it's uglier than chocolate dye. It's going in F tier. Next up is the emerald dye, which is a super rare drop from emeralds, if I remember correctly, or it used to be. I think it's from emerald slimes now, but it's super rare because no one kills emerald slimes, so it's going for 1.8 billion a piece at the moment. It is a really pretty dye. I think it would look especially nice on like a Devon set with the jade armor skin for the helmet, or of course on Fermento, and even with like a tank set with a Reaper mask, this probably looks pretty solid. But that price tag is just too much for me, so we're gonna put it in not worth. Next up is the flame armor, which looks a lot like Crimson armor or Skeleton Master armor. It does currently go for 850 million coins a piece, but it looks really good. I'm kind of biased. Orange is my favorite color, so I gotta put this one up there, but it is so expensive. I can't go too high. So I'm gonna put it in A tier. It's too expensive to put in S tier, but it looks so good, man. Next up, we have the fossil dye, which is kind of like a brownish yellow. Currently goes for 350 million coins, but in my opinion, it's just very gross. Like, I wouldn't want to see this with really anything. Even on like a Devon set, this would just... ugh. So for me, this one's going in F tier. Next up is the frostbitten dye, which is one of the newer dyes that drops from Glaciite Mineshafts. It looks so clean. Currently, there's none on the auction house, but 95 of them have been dropped, which compared to the fossil dye, almost 5 times more have been dropped. So it should go for cheaper than fossil dye. However, it does look really nice. So we don't really know what the price normally would be, but it just looks so clean. I think this would go well with most armor sets. Again, Fermento, it probably doesn't work too well with, probably clash with the green, but Devon with like the sapphire skin on it, Warden helmet, shadow goggles, diamond head especially, I think this would go great with, and I just think this looks super clean. Again though, I don't really know the exact price of it, but we're gonna ignore that. It's gotta be S+. This thing looks so good. I'd say that's the cleanest one we've gone over so far, honestly. Okay, next up is Holly dye. This looks pretty good with Reaper Mask. Some of those other ones that look good with everything, maybe could put it on Fermento, but honestly, I'd rather leave the Fermento at base. It does currently go for about 20 million coins, so it is on the cheaper side, and it doesn't look too bad, so that's good enough for me to put it in the very good tier. Next up, we have the Iceberg dye, which I think is about the same color as base mineral armor, kind of a grayish blue. It is, however, going for 1.5 billion coins at the moment, so I don't really think it's worth it. And honestly, I'd almost put it in F tier, but it doesn't look that bad. So we're gonna put it in not worth. B tier. Next up is the Jade dye. Doesn't look too bad. Kind of a mix between Holly dye and the Emerald dye, but personally I like the Emerald dye a lot better, and it's going for almost 800 million coins right now. So for me, that's definitely the not worth tier, going in B2. Next up though is our first animated dye, the brand new lava dye. Now this of course goes very well with Magma Lord and some of those other dyes or helmets that go well with pretty much everything, but I don't think it's very viable with a lot of things like Fermento armor, Devon's armor, diamond heads. It is a very cool dye for Magvalord though. However, also the Pastel Sky dye with the shark helmet for Magvalord is really clean too. These are brand new, so they're going for pretty cheap, about 25 to 30 million coins a piece, but I don't think it's going to change too much for a while because, again, they don't really go with too much. But the things they do go with are very nice, so I'm going to put it in S tier. If the price goes up, it would be bumped down to A, but it's animated. All the animated ones are pretty clean. Next up is the Livid dye, which is very similar to the Bone dye, maybe a little bit more brown than the Bone dye is gray. Currently going for 60 million coins, so it's pretty cheap, but also it's kind of ugly. Probably goes well with Warden helmet, but again, everything does. So I'm gonna put it in the not worth tier. It's just not worth it. Next up is our second animated dye, the Lucky dye. This of course goes super well with Fermento gear and the Lucky Clover helmet if you have one of those. And it's only about 45 million coins a piece right now, which is pretty cheap compared to some of these other ones, and especially for an animated dye, I think it's a bit more viable. Plus I do really like green, so for me, I'm gonna have to put it in S+. Just a little bit nicer than the lava dye in my opinion, so in spite of the price difference, I'm gonna put it in S+. Next up we have the Mango dye. Currently going for 60 million coins a piece, so it's pretty cheap in spite of the fact that you have to forage to drop it. I know this one looks really clean with golden heads, but you shouldn't be using golden heads for too long a lot of times. However, it is very cheap, so I'm going to put it in A tier. Next up is the Matcha dye, which I do like pretty well. I do think Emerald dye looks a little bit cleaner, but this one wouldn't go too horribly with either a Reaper mask or a Fermento helmet. However, they are almost 600 mil a piece right now, and realistically, you could buy like 2 whole sets of Lucky dyes with that money. Actually, like 3 or 4. So for me, it's just bad. Not worth it. And you might as well just get a Lucky dye. Next up is the Midnight, which is the cleanest purple skin in my opinion. It does currently go for 500 million coins, but it just looks so good. With that price tag though, I don't think I can put it in S tier. It is very, very good though. Next up is the Mocha dye, which is kind of like coffee colored, I guess. Currently going for about 70 mil a piece, but it doesn't look that good, honestly. Like, there's no helmet that I'm like, ooh, that would look great with this, you know? So in my opinion, it's just not worth it. Next up, we have the Nadeshiko dye. Currently goes for about 50 million coins, and it looks pretty decent. It's kind of like a darker or lighter pink, a grayish pink, I guess. But again, I don't think there's any dyes or armor sets that would really go great with this. It is pretty cheap, but right now you can get the Pastel Sky dyes for a pretty similar price, I believe. So you might as well just get one of those instead. So once again, putting it in B tier. It's just not worth it. Next up is the Necron dye. I haven't done enough M7s to hate this yet. At the moment, it's only 28 million coins, and it looks pretty solid. It's a little bit brighter than the Archfiend dye or the Flame dye. I do think Carmine looks a bit better, but this one is very, very cheap, and it's pretty close to Archfiend, so I'm going to put it in the awesome tier. This would look great on a Crimson set, or really anything else that you only wear a Warden helmet with, and it's super duper cheap, so if you like red, this one's pretty solid. Next up is the Nyanza dye, which I think is the closest to pure white dye that there is. It's got like a slight greenish gray texture to it, but it's currently going for 90 million coins, so it's a little bit on the pricier side. Again, compared to some of these that cost like billions, it's not that bad, but I do think it's pretty much on the same tier as Bone dye. However, it does have that slightly odd tint to it, so I'm going to put it in the very good tier. I do think Bone dye is still a bit better. Next up is the Pastel Sky dye, which looks really clean on Magvalord with that great shark skin helmet, which if you haven't seen it is this helmet right here. And the dye is pretty cheap right now. It did just come out pretty recently, but it's only about 50 mil a piece at the moment. And once again, it's an animated armor set. So in my opinion, this is an S+, super cheap, super underrated, would recommend. Next up we have the Pearlescent dye, which is about as close to Warden dye as you can get without actually getting one. At the moment it goes for 150 million coins, which is actually more expensive than Warden dye, so in my opinion you might as well just get a Warden dye instead. So I'm straight up throwing it in bad. Next up is the Pelt dye, which is like a purplish brown mud color. There's currently none on the auction house, and that's probably because only 18 of them have been dropped. It's gotten from trapper animals, which nobody really does, and it also doesn't really look that good, so really expensive, doesn't look that great. I think you guys can tell where this is going, right down to F tier. Next is the periwinkle dye, which I do think looks a little bit better than bone dye, but at the moment it's going for like 10 times the price of bone dye. A billion coins is a lot of coins, and I just don't think it's worth it. It looks good, but it's just too expensive. Next up is another animated dye, the portal dye, which is my personal favorite dye in the game. I really like the purple color to it and all the different colors that it goes through. Again, looks really great on Final Destination and with any like black helmet or white helmet that you can use. So for me, it's an easy S+. Best dye in the game in my opinion, and it's super duper cheap, only 40 million coins a piece right now, so I highly recommend this if you're looking into getting a dye. Next up is the pure black armor. At the moment it's 300 million coins a piece, but it's pure black. It looks super good with literally anything, like even Fermento. You put this on a Fermento set, it's still gonna look good. So in spite of the cost, that is also an S+ tier. Next up is the pure blue set, which also looks really clean. It does have a price tag of 400 mil a piece though. It is definitely one of the best blue sets in the game, but again, it's so expensive. I have to put it in A tier just because of the price tag, but it is very tempting to put it in S. Finally, the pure white dye, which there's so many in the game that are so close to. The bone dye, periwinkle. It costs 300 mil a piece for this, but again, there's so many different dyes that are really close to it that cost so much less money. It looks really nice, but like if you saw somebody running around with it, you'd assume they were wearing bone dyed armor. And honestly, I think periwinkle looks better. So for me, this is an F tier. It's just not different enough from bone dye. Now is our last pure dye, the yellow dye, which at the moment is going for 200 mil a piece. It does look really, really nice, but I don't see it going too well with a lot of armor sets. Again, Fermento is the main one I have in mind, and you wouldn't want to change your Devon's armor from gold into this really. So I'll put it in very good because it does look really nice, but again, a lot of helmets don't really go with it, and it is kind of expensive. Next up is the rose dye, another animated dye, kind of similar to the flame dye where it's red, but it goes kind of towards the pink side of the spectrum instead of towards the orange and yellow side. I do think this would look good with like the ruby Devon helmet skin or one of the redder skins for the Fermento helmet, and it's only about 46 million coins at the moment. So for me, that's another S+. Next up is the sangria dye, which in my opinion is probably the best red dye there is. It is the brightest red by far. I think it is just the best red color in the game. However, there are none on the auction house, and that is because only 14 of these have been dropped. So it is ridiculously expensive, and because of that, I've got to put it in A. It looks really clean, but it's just so expensive. Next up is the secret dye, which is just a straight up gray dye. Currently it's going for 420 million coins, but again, it's just gray, which is not really that good looking to me, and it's so expensive. I can't. It's F tier, man. It's just not good. I don't know, I'll bring it up to not worth. It doesn't look that bad. It's just there's not really anything that I'd rather put this on. If I'm gonna go buy a dye, I'll probably get bone dye if I'm wanting something similar to that color, rather than spend like over 5 times more on a different dye that looks just a little bit better maybe. Again, honestly, it doesn't even look that much better in my opinion. I don't know if it does look better. I'd rather have bone dye than secret dye. Next up is the tentacle dye, which is one of my favorites as well. It is 700 million coins though, because it is a super rare drop from Kudra. And even though it looks so cool, it pretty much only goes super well with like shadow goggles. And again, that price tag is just insane. So I have to put it in not worth. Next up is another animated dye, the Warden dye. One of the coolest looking animated dyes in the game. I still think Portal is better, but this is probably second best, and is currently going for 120 million coins, the most expensive animated dye. It of course goes super well with the true Warden helmet skin, but you guys know it's going in S+. Next up is the wild strawberry dye. This is our last dye that is currently in the game, and it's currently going for 60 million coins. It's a pretty common drop considering how much people farm, and it does look really, really nice, especially with the right skin on a Fermento helmet, or even without one. So that cheap of a price and looking as good as it does, that one's got to go in S for me. It's not quite S plus because it doesn't go well with a lot of things. And of course, it's not animated, but it does look really nice with the things it does go with, and it's pretty cheap. So gonna put that one in S. But this is our finished tier list. Again, there will be a link in the description if you guys want to make your own. But I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to drop a like on the video. If it gets enough likes and gets enough views, I might make more tier lists in the future. So let me know in the comments what other tier lists I should make. And thank you so much for watching to the end. I'll catch you on the next one. Have an amazing rest of your day, and God bless.